Hello and welcome to the first edition of Fabric of Society's videocast. It's a time of great change, social upheaval, political upheaval, health upheaval, and it's a time when I think what I call the fabric of society is being put under pressure from a number of different directions. So in this series of interviews, I'm hoping to speak to some leading people from government, sport, business, arts, charity, and just see how those sectors are working together increasingly to create a much stronger, more sustainable fabric to bind our futures together at a time when, frankly, it all feels rather under pressure. So it's my massive pleasure today to be talking to one of the world's leading sports administrators. But more than that, he's a tireless campaigner for the role that sport can play in building a better world. So welcome, David Gravenberg, Chief Executive of the Commonwealth Games Federation. Thanks so much for joining me. And if I can just start by asking you, what is it that drives your passionate belief that sport is about more than just competition and that it is something that can actually address some of the world's great problems?
Well, Niels, thank you so much for having me. I'm an eternal optimist, and I like to feel that I have been able to keep my ideals and learn to not be as naive as I once was. I truly believe that we are in the business of creating people's proudest moments. And in doing that, we have not only a wonderful, powerful, influential platform at our disposal with many, many different actors and players under our duty of care, but also a real force that has the ability to capture people's imagination, attention, be recognized and remembered for both the good, the great, but also the bad and the ugly. And so it is really a manifestation of life in a very compact, in some cases made for television form. And so I've since a very young age, growing up in New Orleans, Louisiana, saw the power of sport to be a real equalizer. I've seen the power of sport to give people hope, and to steal from Mandela where there once was despair. I've seen it firsthand. And so feeling that and fueling that and seeing the results of my labor in contributing to that, I really feel that sport is a contributor to making society more whole.
And was there one thing, was there a moment from your childhood growing up in the Deep South that made you think, do you know what, this sport is a game changer?
I grew up in inner city New Orleans, and New Orleans is, at that time was known for many, many things. It was the murder capital of the United States, the heart disease capital of the United States, and also had a really rough reputation in terms of its literacy and public school systems and so forth. Everything that you would say we shouldn't be proud of. Sport was kind of that one aspect. It didn't matter your socioeconomic background, your race. It was something we could really rally around. And it, as a young athlete, it gave me a platform to not discriminate and to help someone up off the ground. And I first, despite some of the hatred that was outside the field of play, that was playing out in the streets and so forth. And that was something that I reflected on. I couldn't wait to get away from it as well when I was a kid. But now that I look back on that, it certainly was defining and shaped me, and going and helped me gain a much better understanding of my own privilege, my own bias, my own prejudices, and start to recover from them. And sport. Go ahead.
Because there's a city, right, which was ripped asunder by the floods and the hurricanes, and really did have to rebuild its fabric, and I think it was quite led by sport, wasn't it? And some of the sponsors of the big sports companies that came together much more so than federal government. Is that right?
Absolutely. You know, the New Orleans Superdome, our great gladiatorial arena, was the first real, building to be invested in and built back. And that, along with our convention center, were really the two pieces of the puzzle that were really used for the recovery and rebuild of New Orleans after Katrina. And dare I say, there was a moment in my childhood at 12 years old, where the World Expo came to town. And all those things I mentioned before, a major event like the Expo that spanned a year of exhibitions and demonstrations and experiences transformed the city's feeling and mojo. And that's one of the other, I think, seminal moments in my childhood that gave me the hope for major events and the power of a major event to start defining, a city by what it's proud of and what its unique and distinct characteristics. So obviously the home of jazz, the wonderful Creole and Cajun food, the art, and all the other genres of music and culture that amalgamated both historically present, but also some of the future ambitions as a port city, were all manifested around the Expo in 1984. And that was also something that, again, reflecting on it now, made me realize the power that we have when we host some of these major sporting events, if we get the culture, the business, and sport right.
Absolutely, and the best do it really well. So saying you and I, you just reminded me, we first met probably in about 2001, when we were both involved in the Commonwealth Games in Manchester, first multi-sport games to bring what we then called elite athletes with disability into multi-sport games. And it was part of a vision that to my mind, the great Howard Bernstein had for giving rebirth to the east of Manchester, and very much saw a sporting event as a way of throwing rocket fuel on urban regeneration. Fantastically successful. Your job now is to persuade other cities, other countries to take up the Commonwealth Games. How do you pitch that? I saw a quote, I think, just a couple of months ago, where he said it's not about 11 days of bread and circuits, which I thought it was a great quote. But what is it about? How do you persuade people to put vast sums of money into these things?
Well, you look at it as an investment, and every context is different. So, if you look at Glasgow, Birmingham, and Manchester, these are wonderful regeneration projects. If you start to look at Delhi 2010, it was an emerging market opportunity. If you look at Gold Coast and Melbourne, more of a sustained market and played into a much more of a sustained narrative and agenda. So if you look at the context in which you're working in, and you can shape both the requirements of hosting the games, but also some of the ambitions and aspirations of a games stimulus, for that local context, then it becomes truly something for the people, by the people. And what Manchester certainly taught me, I mean, beyond being, one of the most inclusive events of its time, and really set the stage, some of the really bold action and courageous decisions that the city council did to use Manchester to reach out and activate its citizenship, and through its a very robust transformational volunteer program that was recognized by the United Nations volunteers as being the model for major events. Manchester and its own infrastructural regeneration, and just second to none in terms of writing the book on how a municipality uses a major sporting event to not only build bricks and mortar, but to fill those events with meaningful community and global programming, which led to obviously attracting other signs of investment. And you look 20 years on now, or 18 years on now. It's the gift that just keeps giving. Yeah. What was wonderful is Manchester credits the Commonwealth Games as that seminal moment that really transformed the city. And so I feel both a sense of not only opportunity but responsibility to uphold some of those ideals in what we do now. What I think I've noticed, though, is that beyond just strict narratives and strict requirements, we need to be adaptable and engaging and really empathetic to the realities on the ground wherever we work. At the same time, challenging, but it's generally challenging to get the best out of people. And that's one of the things that I think what we've tried to shape is a narrative within the Commonwealth that really brings a sense of solidarity, but also a sense of real local relevance as well.
Look, I'm sure you're right, and yeah, Manchester was about more than just a catalyst for regeneration, and just as I'm sure Birmingham 2022 will be about much more than a catalyst for regeneration of Birmingham. But I know, but just taking that on a step, I know that you've sort of captured some of your personal philosophy in a rebrand of the Commonwealth Games Federation, and thumbs up to you. Federation is a word that's never understood and should rarely be used, in my view. But Commonwealth Sport and the Commonwealth Sport Foundation is something that I think is fascinating. Can you share some of your thinking behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. So a few years ago, when we started to refresh the narrative after Glasgow, and it was in 2015, we decided to become a movement, to go beyond a federation that simply organized the games every 4 years, but to actually become a global sporting movement that was going to uphold, three basic areas, or try to influence the world through three impact areas of peace, sustainability, and prosperity.
So that is a big challenge. That's a big challenge. And I mean, as I say, I laud you for your ambition. How can the Commonwealth Games movement do that?
It really starts with, if you look at peace, you can't have sustainable and prosperous communities unless you actually have peaceful communities. And so, if you look at that as the foundation, we need to be able to have a bedrock that respects, protects, and promotes human rights. And in doing so, we recognize marginalized groups of people, whether that's that's the diversity element of our movement and of our geography and our demography as the Commonwealth, in all of its various forms. And we have plenty of diversity in the Commonwealth, just as there's plenty of diversity in Birmingham. Once you've respected people's rights and you start to recognize them, you identify where there has been or are conflicts are existing, and you can start to look to resolve them through the power of sport, through the power of engagement and convening power that we have. And then we can start these awfully challenging journeys of truth and reconciliation. And it doesn't matter whether it's Glasgow with religious sectarianism or Gold Coast with issues around the challenges of atrocities committed against Indigenous people, or the real ever-present issues around racial inequality or the legacy of slavery. Every community has some or all of those component issues and more. And so what we started to do was saying, okay, we need to address this right up front. And as we're hosting the games, what is the opportunity for us to shift the dial and understand the context in terms of, is this a rights-abiding community and city? Is everyone respected? Where are the conflicts? And where do we have to resolve things? I don't know about your family, but my family, there's certainly things that we need to reconcile. And so every family has that, every community has that. And so big and small, we've taken, we feel, is a very mature approach to not judging, but engaging locally. In doing that, we
if
then
I may interrupt for a second, I think it is mature, but I think it's brave. I mean, you have stood out as a leading administrator who's prepared to say, actually, athletes have the right to make political observations. They indeed possibly should be encouraged to, maybe to take the knee on the podium. And I hear what you say about the Commonwealth Games, but do you think it can be more than just an amplifier or a lens through which other people can see global issues? Can it nudge them? Can it change things? Can it build the fabric of the Commonwealth society?
Absolutely. If you look at the foundation, we work within the context of three kind of guiding documents. One is, of course, the Commonwealth Charter, which stands for peace, prosperity, good governance, and human rights. Mm-hmm. And that was established by Commonwealth governments in 1954 and was refreshed in 2013. And there are ideals that all of the Commonwealth countries have really subscribed to. We then have the Sustainable Development Goals, and everyone has signed up to shifting the dial on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Mm. And then last but not least, we have our impact framework, which is built on peace, sustainability, and prosperity. So those three the kind of guiding forces really do give us the opportunity to advocate, to first build awareness, then advocate, and then take action. Yeah. So, we have the chance to build awareness through an event on what are the issues, and through that journey of the event, we can actually put our foot down, raise our hand, and say we advocate to promote and change this. And then we also have a unique period of time to start shifting the dial, and whether that's investing in projects that have never been invested in before, or screaming as loud as we can, or shaping some guidelines or documents that will give opportunities that did not exist. We firmly believe that not only the games, but the journey to the games and our movement across 53 countries and 72 nations and territories really has the ability to not maybe be the panacea, mm-hmm. but certainly be a major contributor and leading movement in this space.
Yeah. And presumably that's something you look for in your partners in putting these events on, whether it's a host city or a national government or increasingly corporate sponsors as well. You want them all to share that vision and contribute to that vision, I assume.
Well, we see that as a great way for everyone to nail their colors to the mast and say, we stand for humanity, we stand for equality, and we stand for the wonderful ability to use opportunities like a games, like a cultural program, like a business forum, to really, really shift the dial and give people opportunities they otherwise wouldn't have. So, unleash and unshackle their destiny. And so everything that we do in terms of our values, we look to uphold humanity, equality, and destiny, and from that create peace, sustainability, and prosperity. And our new brand and our new logo really represents those three vectors going up from our values and the boundless impact that we can have.
And are you finding that the way people respond to you has changed in even the last 6 months with everything that's been going on in the world? Do you find companies are looking for this holistic way into supporting events? Do you find countries are maybe viewing an event in a different way now? They're not just looking at it as a 11-day of sport to sport wash your reputation. They're about genuinely creating something. Is that something you're seeing?
I think people are initially surprised that a brand like the Commonwealth would essentially be synonymous with upholding human rights or sustainable development, or because obviously the complexity of its shared history that many people associate with the Commonwealth, or some of the ambitions around, apologies, my dogs are in the background.
It's okay, we're all at home.
But some of these, I would say, the pre-assumptions of what the Commonwealth is and isn't, I think initially were what gave a bit of caution to some people in terms of engaging with the brand. I think as we've gone through Gold Coast, and obviously with the success of Glasgow as well, people recognize that we're not just responding to a trend. We're actually setting trends and being a trailblazer in many spaces. And one of the reasons is because our distinct geography and the people we serve and we represent, and that shared history how that all converges together in terms of 2/3 of the world's small states,
Yeah.
half of the top 20 emerging cities in the Commonwealth, 1.6 billion young people out of our 2.4 billion people strong. So 60% of the Commonwealth is under the age of 29. Issues, boundless issues of inequality and statements of equality that the Commonwealth leads in, and then all this complexity around the shared history.
Yeah.
All of that really has given us a wonderful platform to lead the way in these courageous conversations, take the brave and bold action from what we learn from one another.
Mm.
And we've been fortunate enough to be able to use the power of sport to be the catalyst for that. And the athletes are responding to it. We're seeing more athletes able to take their voices and take flight and to really have impact in their communities and further afield.
And what's your ambition for the foundation, David? I know you've very cleverly primed it with some money from host city contracts. Great idea. I think getting contracts to buy into a vision as well as a delivery mechanism is something I applaud you for. But do you see it in the future as being a £500 million fund that people can bid to? How big could this be?
It's boundless, that's what we want to. It's focused on peace, sustainability, and prosperity. It's a combination of programs, projects, and grants. We're obviously walking before we run, but we really do see Birmingham 2022 and the lead up to that critical moment as a really important phase to start mobilizing people, getting people familiar with the conversation, and to start our fundraising efforts so that we can have programs that continue in perpetuity. How can we make our youth games fit for purpose and fit as a charitable cause and not just a major sporting event? And how can we use that to transform young leaders? And what programs are we running in terms of driving greater inclusivity across the Commonwealth for parasport athletes in partnership with the IPC? Relief programs.
Do you think it could work locally? I mean, in my experience, and it's, sadly like you, I'm not under 29 like the majority of the Commonwealth population. I've got a bit more experience under my belt than that. But over the years, I've never found it hard to find cities, governments, businesses who want to partner with the sort of sport, art, charitable sector. But actually, lots of them recognise it's hard to do it well, and they might need a vehicle to do it. And I can certainly see globally that Commonwealth Sport Foundation is great. What advice would you give, say, to Birmingham to say how could they replicate that locally for the businesses across the West Midlands that want to support this because it's their event, but they really want to make a difference? Is that something you see as part of your role?
Yes, and I think the foundation in particular plays well, not only globally but very locally, and it acts as certainly a catalyst for broader conversations, getting public, private, and third sector to work smarter together. So issues around, for example, jobs and skills academy for young people in the lead up to the games, and how can you acquire skills, get the experience that maybe a games provides you, whether it's volunteering or contract experience or actually being employed by the organizing committee. What are we doing to use that opportunity? How are we engaging young people in those communities, giving them voice, giving them a sense of ownership of not only the games, but of their community purpose? So what's critical is that the foundation works with enough agility that it doesn't come in and mandate programs to people, but what it does is accentuates existing programs, existing initiatives, current ambitions, or unearths things that only an opportunity like a games can do to really bring forward really meaningful seismic and systemic change within a local community. And the ambition for the foundation is to take some of these best practice models from place to place to place, connect the Commonwealth, and really make good on our promise to ensure that, when we leave Birmingham in 2022, it's more peaceful, more sustainable, and more prosperous.
Brilliant. David, I'm just going to finish with one thing. It's a quote you have on your LinkedIn profile from Maya Angelou that says, if you don't like something, change it. And if you can't change it, change your attitude. If there's one thing you could change about sport and the impact it can have outside of the stadium on the world on which it plays, what's the one thing you'd change?
I think sport for a long time has been very exclusive. And in many cases, it has really tried to cater to a very privileged existence, and it's the whole hierarchical model is its construct. I think times have changed, and certainly with these wonderful monstrosities that we all are plugged into on a regular basis, sincerity and style are key. And I think if sport can become more sincere and more stylistically agile, I think sport has a very, very bright and boundless future in many, many respects. And I think debunking this kind of patriarchy, that kind of hierarchical construct, and becoming more, and this is a lovely word for cocktail parties, creating more of an autocracy where we play to our strengths, that we have that agility and work and are able to adapt to the realities of where we are or the time we are in. I think sport is uniquely placed to make that transition, and has to adopt a culture that is willing to be less self-preserving and probably in some cases passive-aggressive, and become much more direct, and I guess much more selfless. And my hope is that we in sport continue to have open and frank conversations, use the platforms that we have to truly represent those we claim to represent and serve. And I'm optimistic, and I'll continue to beat the drum in this direction. But that would be my hope.
David, thank you for always being optimistic, and thank you for being some of those things. Great integrity, great authenticity, and a change maker, and a change maker that will change and improve the fabric of our society. So thanks very much for joining me today. I've really enjoyed chatting to you.